The first light of dawn crept through the towering windows of Hartwell, Thornton and Associates, casting long shadows across the pristine marble floors. Marcus Chun pushed his cart quietly through the corridors, the soft squeak of wheels the only sound disturbing the morning silence. His weathered hands gripped the handle with practiced ease, decades of careful work etched into every callus and line. At 42, Marcus moved with the unhurried precision of someone who understood that true craftsmanship took time. He paused before the conference room doors, extracting his keys with the same deliberate care he applied to everything. The brass nameplate gleamed under the hallway lights, announcing the domain of the city's most prestigious international law firm. Inside, Marcus began his routine, each chair positioned exactly 12 inches from the mahogany table, each crystal water glass polished until it caught light like a prism. The oriental carpet straightened with gentle tugs that spoke of respect for beautiful things, regardless of who might notice. The morning news played softly on the mounted television, discussing trade agreements and diplomatic tensions in languages that shifted from English to Mandarin to what sounded like Vietnamese. Marcus paused in his cleaning, tilting his head slightly as the reporter stumbled over pronunciation of a Southeast Asian official's name. A brief smile crossed his face before he returned to his work. His phone buzzed softly. A text from his 80-year-old daughter, Sophia, already awake and getting ready for school at their neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. "Good morning, Papa. Remember you promised to help with my geography project tonight. Love you." Marcus typed back carefully, his large fingers surprisingly graceful on the small screen. "Good morning, little star. Geography project tonight, I promise. Learn something wonderful today." The elevator chimed in the distance, signaling the arrival of the firm's early associates. Marcus quickened his pace, knowing that in 20 minutes, the building would transform from his quiet sanctuary into a battlefield of egos and billable hours. He preferred the morning hours, when the space belonged to him and the cleaners, when he could work without the weight of invisible eyes and dismissive glances. He moved to the next floor, where the senior partner's offices commanded views of the city skyline. Through Bradley Thornton's window, Marcus could see the university campus where he once walked different halls, where his name had been painted on office doors and students had gathered to hear him speak about the beauty of human language in all its forms. That life felt like someone else's story now. 3 years since the budget cuts that eliminated his entire department. 3 years since he'd traded academic robes for a janitor's uniform, all to keep Sophia fed and sheltered and safe. The work was honest, and there was dignity in keeping beautiful spaces clean for others to use. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between tasks, Marcus felt the weight of words unspoken and knowledge unused. A drop of cleaning solution fell from his cloth onto his shoe, and he bent to wipe it away. As he straightened, his eyes caught the bookshelf in Thornton's office, filled with legal texts and what appeared to be several volumes on international law. One spine bore characters he recognized as Khmer. Another showed the distinctive script of Laotian. Books that likely sat unread, purchased more for appearance than understanding. Marcus finished the office and moved on, his cart wheels whispering across carpet and tile. In a few hours, this place would fill with people who moved through the world assuming their perspectives were universal, their languages the only ones that mattered. But Marcus had learned long ago that the world was far larger and more complex than most people imagined. His phone buzzed again. This time, a photo from Sophia, her breakfast of eggs and toast arranged into a smiley face, with a message that read, "Mrs. Rodriguez says to tell you she made extra coffee for you tonight." Marcus smiled, typing back, "Tell her thank you, and save room for dinner. I'm making your favorite." The sun climbed higher, painting the offices in golden light. Soon the building would wake fully, and Marcus would become invisible again, a quiet presence moving through spaces where important people made important decisions. But for now, in these peaceful minutes, he was exactly where he needed to be, doing work that mattered in ways both small and profound. By 9 o'clock, the transformation was complete. The marble corridors that had whispered with Marcus's quiet presence now echoed with the sharp percussion of designer heels and Italian leather soles. The building hummed with the particular energy of people who believe their time was worth more than others. Bradley Thornton emerged from the elevator like a man surveying his kingdom, his silver hair perfectly styled and his charcoal suit cut to emphasize shoulders that suggested power, even at 55. He strode past Marcus without acknowledgement, speaking loudly into his phone about quarterly projections and client retention. The janitor might as well have been furniture. Marcus continued polishing the water fountain near the elevators, his movements steady and unobtrusive. He had learned the art of occupying space without claiming it, of being present without being seen. It was a skill born of necessity, refined through years of navigating environments where his existence was peripheral to the main narrative. Miranda Cross swept past next, her auburn hair pulled into a severe chignon that matched her expression. She paused at her assistant's desk, tapping manicured nails against the polished surface while rattling off instructions about rescheduling depositions and confirming lunch reservations. Her voice carried the particular tone of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. When she noticed Marcus nearby, her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the way one might react to finding an insect in an otherwise pristine room. Not disgust, exactly, but a subtle acknowledgement that something was out of place in her carefully ordered world. The morning meeting commenced in the main conference room, visible through glass walls that were meant to suggest transparency while maintaining hierarchy. Marcus could see the partners arranged around the mahogany table, their body language speaking volumes about pecking order and territorial claims. Thornton held court at the head, gesturing expansively, while others nodded with calculated attention. As Marcus worked nearby, fragments of conversation drifted through the barely open door. Talk of new clients from Southeast Asia, concerns about communication barriers, references to previous translation mishaps that had cost the firm both money and reputation. There was frustration in their voices, the particular irritation of people who expected the world to accommodate their limitations rather than addressing them. A young associate named Jeremy approached the water fountain where Marcus worked, nodding politely. "Good morning," he said quietly, the greeting carrying genuine human acknowledgement. Marcus returned the nod with a slight smile, appreciating the small kindness in a place where such gestures were rare. Thornton's voice boomed from the conference room, cutting through other conversations. "We cannot afford another translation disaster like the Nguyen Industries debacle. That cost us $2 million and 6 months of reputation repair." His tone suggested that such failures were beneath the firm's dignity, inconveniences that should not exist in a properly ordered universe. Cross's response was equally emphatic. "The translation services we hire charge premium rates but deliver mediocre results. Half of them couldn't distinguish between formal and casual register if their contracts depended on it." Her words carried the particular venom reserved for service providers who failed to justify their fees. Marcus moved to the next section of hallway, his cleaning supplies arranged with military precision in his cart. He had heard similar conversations dozens of times over the past 3 years, complaints about language barriers treated as personal affronts rather than solvable challenges. The irony was not lost on him, though he kept such observations private. A delivery person approached the reception desk, speaking halting English while trying to explain a problem with an international shipment. The receptionist's patience visibly strained as she struggled to understand his accent, finally calling for someone else to handle the situation. The delivery person's embarrassment was palpable, his shoulders hunching as he waited for assistance that came with barely concealed irritation. Through the conference room glass, Marcus could see Thornton checking his Rolex with theatrical emphasis, a gesture designed to communicate the value of his time to anyone paying attention. Cross had opened a leather portfolio and was making notes with a gold pen, her movements sharp and decisive. The other partners maintained expressions of serious attention, though several glanced repeatedly at their phones. The meeting broke up with the usual flurry of handshakes and shoulder pats, the partners dispersing to their respective domains with renewed purpose. Thornton paused near the door, straightening his tie while speaking to Cross about lunch plans at an exclusive club where membership-weighted lists stretched for years. As they passed Marcus's position, their conversation continued without acknowledgement of his presence. It was as if he existed in a parallel dimension, visible only when his services were specifically required. The casual dehumanization was so complete it seemed unconscious, a learned behavior passed down through generations of privilege. Cross's heels clicked against the marble as she headed toward her corner office, already dictating messages to her assistant about rescheduling international calls to accommodate time zone differences. Her tone suggested such accommodations were burdensome inconveniences rather than basic professional courtesies. Marcus finished the hallway and moved his cart toward the service elevator, passing the reception area where expensive flowers arrived weekly and magazines were arranged with geometric precision. The space was designed to intimidate and impress, every element carefully chosen to reinforce hierarchy and exclude those deemed unworthy of the inner sanctum. The morning had established its rhythm, the dance of power and subservience playing out in familiar patterns. But Marcus sensed something different in the air today, a tension that suggested the comfortable certainties of this world might soon face an unexpected test. The crisis arrived precisely at 11:37, announced by the urgent clicking of Cross's heels across the marble lobby. Marcus paused in his window, cleaning to observe the commotion unfolding near the reception desk, where a family of elegantly dressed visitors stood with the particular stillness of people navigating unfamiliar territory. The patriarch of the group, a distinguished man in his 60s wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, spoke in measured tones to the receptionist. His words flowed in what Marcus immediately recognized as a regional dialect of Khmer, the formal register used in business settings, peppered with honorific phrases that indicated both education and cultural sophistication. Beside him stood a woman of similar age, her silk dress the color of deep emeralds, and a younger man who appeared to be their son, his nervous energy barely contained beneath his composed exterior. They carried themselves with the quiet confidence of substantial wealth, but their eyes held the uncertainty of people whose linguistic bridge to this world had suddenly collapsed. The receptionist's smile had frozen into professional panic. She nodded repeatedly while clearly understanding nothing, her responses growing more strained with each passing moment. "I'm so sorry," she kept repeating, as if volume might somehow breach the language barrier. "Let me get someone who can help you." Cross materialized with the swift efficiency of someone responding to a five-alarm fire. Her smile was brilliant and completely artificial as she extended her hand to the patriarch, speaking slowly and loudly, as if dealing with the hearing impaired rather than the linguistically different. "Welcome to Hartwell, Thornton and Associates. We are so pleased to have you here today." The man responded politely in his native tongue, his tone carrying subtle notes of confusion about why this important meeting seemed to be starting with such fundamental communication problems. His son stepped forward, attempting English with careful pronunciation, but his vocabulary was clearly limited to basic business terms. Thornton appeared as if summoned by corporate emergency, his silver hair catching the lobby lights as he strode toward the group. His expression suggested supreme confidence in his ability to resolve any situation through sheer force of personality and expensive dental work. His greeting was hearty and meaningless, accompanied by vigorous handshaking that left their visitors looking increasingly bewildered. Behind the scenes, Marcus could hear the frantic phone calls beginning. Cross had retreated to the reception desk, her voice tight with barely controlled panic as she spoke to their usual translation service. "What do you mean you don't have anyone available? This is a $15 million client, for God's sake." The translation service's response was clearly inadequate, judging by Cross's increasingly sharp questions about backup options and emergency coverage. Her professional composure was beginning to crack around the edges as she realized their expensive linguistic safety net had developed a critical hole at the worst possible moment. Thornton continued his enthusiastic pantomime near the elevators, gesturing toward the upper floors while speaking about the firm's prestigious history and commitment to international clients. His words bounced off the language barrier like stones thrown at bulletproof glass, creating awkward silences that he filled with increasingly desperate joviality. The patriarch's patience was beginning to show strain. He exchanged glances with his wife that spoke volumes about their growing concern over the professionalism of this supposedly elite firm. In his limited English, he attempted to explain something about time constraints and other meetings scheduled for later in the day. Cross returned with news that sent visible ripples of alarm through the assembled partners. Our primary service is completely booked, and their Khmer specialist is in Cambodia for the next 2 weeks. The backup service can maybe get someone here by tomorrow afternoon, but they can't guarantee fluency in the specific dialect. Thornton's smile never wavered, but Marcus could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Tomorrow afternoon meant lost momentum, rescheduled meetings, and a very real possibility that their clients might seek more competent representation elsewhere. In the high-stakes world of international law, such delays could be fatal to business relationships. The younger man in the client family pulled out his phone, speaking rapidly to someone in what sounded like urgent, frustrated tones. His body language suggested he was reporting problems to colleagues or superiors, possibly recommending alternative arrangements that would not bode well for the firm's reputation. Emergency consultations began happening in hushed tones near the reception desk. Associates were dispatched to call every translation service in the city, while Cross worked her phone with the intensity of someone trying to prevent a natural disaster. Her conversations grew increasingly heated as she discovered that quality interpreters for specialized dialects were not commodities that could be summoned on demand. Thornton maintained his position near the clients, his performance growing more theatrical as his internal panic increased. He showed them brochures about the firm's international expertise while being completely unable to communicate the most basic concepts about their legal needs. The irony was lost on him, but painfully obvious to everyone else present. The patriarch finally approached his wife and son, speaking in low, measured tones that clearly indicated serious discussion about their options. Marcus understood every word of their conversation about the unprofessional situation, their concerns about working with a firm that seemed unprepared for international clients, and their consideration of the competitor firm downtown that had been recommended by mutual business associates. Cross emerged from her phone calls with the expression of someone who had exhausted all conventional solutions. Her announcement to Thornton was delivered in a whisper, but Marcus caught enough to understand that no qualified interpreter would be available until the following week. The $15 million deal was hanging by a thread that seemed ready to snap at any moment. Marcus moved his cart closer to the lobby's edge, positioning himself near a marble pillar where he could continue his cleaning while remaining within earshot of the unfolding crisis. His hands worked automatically, polishing surfaces that were already spotless, while his mind processed every nuance of the conversation happening 20 feet away. The patriarch, whose name Marcus had caught as Kozul Riang, was speaking to his son in the measured cadences of formal Khmer, explaining his frustration with what he termed the firm's obvious lack of preparation for international business. His words carried the particular weight of someone accustomed to being understood and respected in professional settings. "We traveled 8,000 miles to meet with these people," Kozul was saying, "and they cannot even arrange proper communication." Perhaps Chantha was right about the firm in Chicago. Marcus understood every syllable, every subtle inflection that indicated growing disappointment with what should have been a prestigious business partnership. The son, Dara, responded with the careful deference of someone addressing an elder, but his concern was evident. "Father, we have already committed significant resources to this meeting. Perhaps we should give them another hour to resolve the situation." His English vocabulary was clearly limited to basic business terms, nowhere near sufficient for complex legal negotiations. Marcus felt the familiar weight of knowledge unused, of capabilities hidden beneath the uniform that rendered him invisible to the very people who desperately needed his skills. He had spent 7 years studying Southeast Asian linguistics, had written his doctoral thesis on the evolution of formal registers in Khmer business communication, had been considered one of the leading experts in his field before budget cuts reduced him to this shadow existence. Across the lobby, Cross was speaking in increasingly sharp tones to another translation service, her professional veneer cracking under pressure. "No, we cannot wait until Thursday. This is a time-sensitive matter involving international clients who are standing in our lobby right now." Her voice carried the particular strain of someone watching a career-defining opportunity slip away. Thornton had retreated to the reception desk for an emergency consultation, his confident facade replaced by the rapid-fire problem-solving mode of someone facing potential professional catastrophe. His whispered instructions to various associates created a flurry of activity as people scattered to pursue increasingly desperate solutions. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to absorb the client's growing conversation about their limited options. Kozul's wife, Janitor, spoke in the soft tones of someone offering gentle counsel. "Perhaps this is a sign that we should reconsider our approach entirely. The Singapore firm came highly recommended, and they specifically mentioned their linguistic capabilities during our preliminary discussions." The observation cut straight to the heart of the firm's vulnerability. In an increasingly connected world, the ability to communicate across languages was not a luxury, but a fundamental business requirement. Yet here stood one of the city's most prestigious law firms, completely paralyzed by a challenge that should have been routine. Marcus watched Dara check his phone repeatedly, clearly receiving messages that added to the time pressure. The young man's body language suggested appointments that could not be delayed, connecting flights that would not wait, business obligations that extended far beyond this single meeting. From his position near the pillar, Marcus could see the associates returning with increasingly grim expressions. One shook her head at Cross before even reaching the reception desk. Another ended a phone call with visible frustration, immediately dialing another number in what appeared to be a last-ditch effort. The irony was almost unbearable. Marcus possessed not just conversational ability in Khmer, but deep expertise in the formal business registers, the cultural protocols, the subtle hierarchies that govern such interactions. He could facilitate not just basic communication, but the kind of culturally informed dialogue that built trust and understanding between international partners. But revealing such knowledge would shatter the careful invisibility that protected his position, the job that kept Sophia fed and housed and safe. The academic world had rejected him once. There was no guarantee that exposure here would lead to opportunity rather than suspicion about how a janitor had acquired such specialized knowledge. Cross returned to the clients with another apologetic smile, her explanation clearly inadequate based on their polite but increasingly distant responses. Kozul's nod was the kind offered to someone whose incompetence was becoming impossible to ignore diplomatically. Marcus heard Janitor whisper to her husband about the wisdom of cutting their losses, of pursuing opportunities with organizations that demonstrated basic professional competence in international relations. Her words were gentle but pointed, the kind of observation that could reshape business relationships permanently. The cleaning supplies in Marcus's cart rattled slightly as he moved to a new position, the sound barely audible above the lobby's growing tension. But the movement brought him close enough to see Kozul checking his watch with the particular gravity of someone calculating the cost of wasted time. Time was running out, not just for this meeting, but for any chance of salvaging the relationship. Marcus could feel the weight of decision pressing against his ribs, the knowledge that his intervention could change everything for these people who needed help, for the firm that employed him, and for his own carefully constructed life. In 15 minutes, he realized, watching Dara's increasingly urgent phone conversations, these clients would likely leave. The firm would lose not just this deal, but the reputation damage would spread through international business networks like ripples in Stillwater. And Marcus would remain invisible, his capabilities unknown, his potential contribution reduced to the whisper of cleaning supplies against marble floors. The breaking point arrived with the casual cruelty that only comes from complete certainty in one's superiority. Thornton had gathered his senior associates near the reception desk for what appeared to be a final strategy session, their voices carrying the particular desperation of people watching a disaster unfold in slow motion. "We're looking at a complete professional humiliation," Cross was saying, her composure finally cracking. $15 million walking out the door because we can't handle basic communication. The board will have questions that I don't want to answer. Thornton's response came with the bitter humor of someone grasping for control in an uncontrollable situation. At this point, I'd give my entire paycheck to anyone who could solve this problem. Hell, I let the janitor try if he thought he could help. The comment triggered a ripple of nervous laughter from the assembled associates, the kind of desperate humor that emerges when professional people feel their competence questioned. Someone mentioned that they should probably start documenting the situation for insurance purposes, treating the lost deal as if it were a natural disaster rather than a failure of preparation. Cross picked up on Thornton's theme with the particular viciousness of someone needing to direct frustration somewhere safe. Maybe we should ask the cleaning staff if they speak Cambodian. At least then we could say we explored every option before losing the biggest client of the year. More laughter followed, sharper this time, as the group found temporary relief in mocking hypotheticals that allowed them to feel superior to someone, anyone, in their moment of professional inadequacy. The jokes grew more elaborate, with suggestions about holding up Google Translate or drawing pictures to communicate complex legal concepts. Marcus continued his methodical cleaning, each motion deliberate and controlled, while listening to himself become the punchline in their desperate comedy routine. The familiar sting of casual dehumanization mixed with something newer and more dangerous. The growing certainty that his silence was enabling a preventable disaster. Near the elevators, Kozel was conducting what appeared to be his final conversation with his family about their departure. His tone carried the formality of someone making an executive decision about cutting losses and preserving dignity. Marcus caught phrases about alternative arrangements, about firms that understood the importance of proper preparation for international clients. Thornton's voice rose above the nervous chatter of his associates, his tone taking on the theatrical quality of someone performing for an audience. "You know what? I'm serious about that offer. My entire month's salary to anyone who can translate for these people. We've got nothing left to lose at this point." He gestured broadly toward Marcus, who happened to be polishing the water fountain within perfect earshot. "Look, even our friend here probably speaks more languages than our expensive translation service can provide today. Maybe we should get him a shot." The suggestion triggered genuine laughter this time, the kind that comes from imagining something so absurd it becomes momentarily entertaining. Cross joined in with particular enthusiasm, her stress finding outlet in the comfortable target of someone she considered safely beneath her notice. "Come on," she called toward Marcus with theatrical encouragement, her tone carrying the mock-serious quality of someone addressing a performing animal. "You speak Cambodian, right? Bradley here is offering his paycheck to anyone who can save this meeting." Marcus felt the weight of every gaze in the lobby, from the desperate associates to the increasingly impatient clients to the reception staff, who were watching the firm's reputation disintegrate in real time. The moment stretched with the particular tension of decisions that cannot be undone, of bridges that once crossed change everything. Thornton was warming to his performance now, perhaps sensing the humor might be the only way to maintain some semblance of authority in an impossible situation. "Seriously, translate this, and my paycheck is yours." He gestured toward the clients with exaggerated flourish. "All you have to do is figure out what they're saying and help us close the biggest deal of the year." The challenge hung in the air with a weight of both mockery and genuine desperation. Cross added her own embellishment, her voice carrying the particular cruelty of someone who believed herself completely safe from consequences. "I mean, how hard could it be? Just point and gesture until something works." Marcus set down his cleaning cloth with movements that seemed routine but carried the finality of major decisions. The cart's wheels made their familiar whisper against the marble as he positioned it carefully against the wall, each action deliberate and unhurried, despite the chaos surrounding him. The laughter was beginning to die as people noticed his stillness, the way he had stopped moving with the invisible efficiency of service workers and instead stood with the quiet attention of someone actually listening. Kozel had paused in his conversation with his family, perhaps sensing a shift in the lobby's energy that he couldn't quite identify. Marcus straightened his shoulders, feeling the weight of 3 years of invisibility lifting like a physical burden. His voice, when it came, was quiet but carried clearly across the marble space, cutting through the nervous chatter with the authority of absolute certainty. "I accept your offer, Mr. Thornton." The silence that followed was complete, as if someone had suddenly muted the world. Every conversation stopped, every movement paused, as the impossible became suddenly, terrifyingly real. Thornton's expression shifted from theatrical confidence to genuine confusion, while Cross's smile froze into something that no longer resembled amusement. Marcus stepped forward, his movements carrying the quiet dignity of someone who had finally decided to stop hiding and address Kozel directly in flawless, formal Khmer. Kozel's face transformed the moment Marcus spoke, confusion giving way to relief, and then to something approaching amazement. The janitor's Khmer was not just accurate, but carried the precise tonal qualities and formal honorifics appropriate for addressing a respected elder in a business context. Every syllable demonstrated cultural understanding that went far beyond basic language acquisition. "Good morning, honored sir," Marcus said in formal Khmer, his tone carrying the respectful deference that protocol demanded. "Please allow me to apologize for the confusion and delays you have experienced. My name is Marcus Chun, and I would be honored to assist with communication during your important meeting today." The lobby remained frozen in stunned silence as Kozel responded with visible gratitude, his words flowing in the rapid, complex patterns of someone finally able to express himself fully. Marcus nodded attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated his understanding not just of language, but of the cultural context surrounding international business relationships. Thornton's theatrical confidence had evaporated entirely, replaced by the blank expression of someone watching their understanding of reality reorganize itself. Cross stood with her mouth slightly open, her previous mockery hanging in the air like smoke from an extinguished fire. Marcus turned to address the stunned partners, his voice carrying a quiet authority that none of them had heard before. "Mr. Riang expresses his appreciation for the firm's reputation and looks forward to discussing the proposed joint venture with Cambodian textile manufacturers. However, he is concerned about the delay and hopes we can proceed efficiently, as he has meetings scheduled with the Minister of Commerce tomorrow evening in Phnom Penh." The specificity of the translation sent ripples through the assembled group. This was not basic conversation, but sophisticated business communication involving government officials and international trade relationships. Marcus continued, his words bridging not just languages, but entire worlds of meaning. He also wishes to clarify that his son, Dara, will be serving as the liaison for the American operations, and his wife, Mrs. Chaunary Riang, brings greetings from the board of directors of Royal Angkor Industries. They have prepared detailed financial projections for the first 3 years of operation. Cross found her voice first, though it emerged as little more than a whisper. How do you know all of this?" Marcus responded without breaking his focus on the clients, his professionalism absolute despite the surreal nature of the situation. "Mr. Riang is explaining the scope of their expansion plans, which involve establishing manufacturing partnerships in 6 American cities over the next 18 months. The initial investment is projected at $47 million, with anticipated employment for approximately 1,500 workers." Thornton finally managed to close his mouth, though his expression remained that of someone trying to process impossible information. The numbers Marcus was translating matched exactly with the preliminary figures in their confidential client files, details that had been communicated through expensive translation services over weeks of preparation. Kozel began speaking at greater length, his tone taking on the warmth of someone finally able to communicate properly. Marcus listened with complete attention, occasionally nodding or asking brief questions that demonstrated his engagement with nuances that went far beyond vocabulary. Mr. Riang wishes to compliment the firm's international reputation, Marcus translated, but expresses concern about today's communication difficulties. He says that successful partnerships require understanding that goes beyond legal documents to include cultural respect and professional preparedness. The criticism was delivered with diplomatic courtesy, but its impact was unmistakable. Several associates exchanged glances that spoke volumes about career implications and professional embarrassment. This was the kind of client feedback that would be discussed in boardrooms and performance reviews for months to come. Marcus continued facilitating the conversation, his translations revealing layers of meaning that transformed what had seemed like a simple business meeting into a complex cultural exchange. He explained legal concepts with precision, clarified cultural expectations with sensitivity, and demonstrated understanding of both American and Cambodian business practices. Chan Neri spoke for the first time, her words directed toward Marcus, with a particular warmth reserved for someone who had restored dignity to an uncomfortable situation. Marcus translated her gratitude with perfect formality, explaining that she was impressed by his cultural knowledge and linguistic sophistication. "Your Khmer is exceptional," she had said, with the accent and formal registers of someone educated in classical language. "You understand not just our words, but our intentions. This is very unusual and deeply appreciated." The compliment, delivered through Marcus's translation, highlighted just how far beyond basic language skills his abilities extended. This was not someone who had picked up conversational phrases, but rather someone with deep, scholarly understanding of linguistic and cultural complexities. Dara began explaining their timeline concerns, his relief at finally being understood evident in his increasingly animated gestures. Marcus translated the urgency without losing the diplomatic courtesy that business relationships required, explaining how scheduling pressures related to other international meetings and contractual deadlines. Throughout the exchange, the partners and associates remained frozen in various stages of disbelief. The janitor they had mocked minutes earlier was conducting sophisticated international business negotiations with the fluency of a trained diplomat and the precision of a legal scholar. Marcus paused in his translation to address Thornton directly, his tone respectful but carrying unmistakable authority. "Mr. Thornton, Mr. Riang would like to proceed with the contract discussions if the firm is prepared to continue. He understands that today's situation was unusual, but he hopes we can move forward productively." The question hung in the air with the weight of professional redemption offered unexpectedly by the person they had least expected to provide it. As the conversation deepened, Marcus's abilities revealed themselves in layers that left the assembled partners struggling to process what they were witnessing. When Kozel mentioned contractual terms that required precise legal interpretation, Marcus didn't hesitate or fumble for vocabulary. Instead, he translated with the fluid expertise of someone who understood both legal systems intimately. "The liability clauses you're proposing," Marcus explained to Thornton while maintaining eye contact with Kozel, "follow Cambodian commercial law regarding foreign partnerships. But Mr. Riang suggests modifications that would satisfy both American SEC requirements and the regulations of Cambodia's Ministry of Commerce." Cross leaned forward, her expression shifting from disbelief to something approaching professional interest. "How do you know SEC requirements?" The question came out more sharply than she intended, carrying undertones of suspicion mixed with growing recognition that this situation had moved far beyond anything they could have anticipated. Marcus responded without breaking his rhythm of translation, his focus remaining on facilitating communication rather than defending his qualifications. "Mr. Riang is explaining that their legal team in Phnom Penh has already reviewed American securities regulations with their partners at Clifford Chance. He's familiar with the compliance requirements for international joint ventures." The mention of Clifford Chance, one of the world's most prestigious international law firms, sent another ripple of recognition through the group. This was not casual business conversation, but sophisticated legal negotiation involving multiple jurisdictions and regulatory frameworks. Dara interjected with a question in what sounded like a different dialect entirely, his tones carrying regional variations that Marcus had not yet demonstrated understanding. Without missing a beat, Marcus responded in the same regional variant, his pronunciation shifting to accommodate the subtle differences that marked him as someone with deep dialectal knowledge. Young Mr. Riang is asking about the tax implications of establishing subsidiary operations in different states. Marcus translated, his switch between dialects so seamless that it took several moments for the observers to realize what had happened. He's specifically concerned about how Mississippi's industrial incentives would interact with federal tax credits for manufacturing partnerships with developing nations. Thornton found his voice, though it emerged with the uncertain quality of someone still processing impossible information. You speak multiple dialects? The question carried implications that extended far beyond curiosity about language skills, touching on educational background and professional training that seemed incompatible with janitorial work. Marcus nodded briefly while continuing to facilitate the increasingly complex discussion. Kozel had begun explaining their manufacturing processes, using technical terminology that required not just linguistic translation, but understanding of industrial operations and international trade practices. Mr. Riang describes their current capacity at 12 million units annually, Marcus explained, with plans to expand to 35 million through the American partnership. They utilize sustainable production methods that qualify for EU environmental certifications, which could provide additional market access for products manufactured here. The specificity continued to astound the listening partners. Marcus was not just translating words, but contextualizing information within frameworks of international commerce, environmental regulation, and market development that suggested expertise far beyond language acquisition. Chaunary began speaking about cultural considerations for American operations, her words carrying the diplomatic nuance of someone experienced in cross-cultural business relationships. Marcus translated her concerns with equal sophistication, explaining protocols for managing diverse workforces and maintaining respect for both American efficiency expectations and Cambodian relationship-building traditions. She emphasizes that successful partnerships require understanding that extends beyond contracts, Marcus conveyed, to include respect for different approaches to hierarchy, decision-making, and long-term relationship development. Their experience with European partners has taught them the importance of cultural preparation on both sides. Cross was now taking notes, her earlier mockery completely abandoned in favor of professional attention to information that could reshape their approach to international clients. Her questions became increasingly technical, testing whether Marcus could handle complex legal terminology in both languages. When she asked about intellectual property protections, Marcus translated the query and facilitated a response that demonstrated Kozel's sophisticated understanding of patent law, trademark registration, and technology transfer agreements across multiple jurisdictions. The conversation had evolved into genuine legal consultation conducted through translation that rivaled anything their expensive services had provided. Dara mentioned something about Vietnamese suppliers, shifting into what appeared to be conversational Vietnamese to test Marcus's range. Again, Marcus responded fluently, explaining supply chain relationships that crossed multiple Southeast Asian countries and involved regulatory frameworks in at least 4 different nations. The young man is explaining their supplier network, Marcus translated, which includes partnerships in Vietnam for raw materials, Thailand for component manufacturing, and Malaysia for shipping logistics. They've developed these relationships specifically to serve American market demands while maintaining cost efficiency and quality standards. By now, the partners were exchanging glances that spoke volumes about career implications and missed opportunities. They were witnessing language skills that their firm paid thousands of dollars to access through external services, demonstrated by someone they had been paying minimum wage to clean their offices. Marcus paused briefly to address the increasingly technical nature of the discussion, his tone remaining respectful but carrying subtle authority. Perhaps we should move to the conference room, where Mr. Riang can review the contract documents more comfortably. He's prepared to discuss specific terms and timelines, but he wants to ensure all parties understand the cultural and legal complexities involved. The suggestion was delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who had taken control of a situation through demonstrated competence rather than assigned authority. For the first time since the crisis began, the meeting was proceeding exactly as it should have from the beginning, facilitated by skills that had been present in the building all along, hidden beneath assumptions about worth and capability that were now crumbling with each perfectly translated exchange. The conference room felt different with Marcus present as something other than invisible maintenance staff. He sat at the polished mahogany table with the quiet dignity of someone who belonged there, his cleaning uniform now seeming like a costume rather than a uniform. Kozel had specifically requested that he sit beside him to facilitate the detailed contract discussions that lay ahead. As the legal documents were spread across the table, Cross couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. "Marcus, I have to ask, where did you learn to speak Khmer with such fluency? In the legal terminology, the business concepts, this level of expertise doesn't happen by accident." Marcus continued reviewing the contract language while responding, his tone matter-of-fact rather than defensive. "I spent 7 years studying Southeast Asian linguistics at the university, specializing in comparative analysis of formal business registers across Khmer, Vietnamese, and Laotian. My doctoral dissertation focused on how colonial linguistic influences affected modern commercial communication patterns." The room fell silent except for the soft rustle of papers. Thornton set down his pen with visible care, as if sudden movements might shatter whatever fragile reality had replaced their previous understanding. "You have a doctorate? In linguistics?" "In comparative linguistics with a specialization in Southeast Asian commercial dialects," Marcus confirmed while pointing out a clause that needed clarification for Kozel. "I also spent 2 years doing field research in Cambodia, working with textile manufacturers to document how traditional negotiation language adapted to international business practices." Cross leaned back in her leather chair, her expression cycling through disbelief, embarrassment, and growing recognition of professional implications. "And you're working as our janitor." The statement emerged more as a question, as if speaking it aloud might reveal some explanation that made sense. Marcus translated a question from Dara about environmental compliance standards before addressing her observation. "Budget cuts eliminated my entire department 3 years ago. The university restructured, focusing resources on programs with higher enrollment numbers. Comparative linguistics was considered too specialized to justify continued funding." The explanation landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water, creating ripples of recognition about academic job markets, economic pressures, and the gap between educational achievement and employment opportunities. Several of the younger associates exchanged glances that suggested familiarity with similar stories from their own educational backgrounds. Kozel spoke softly in Khmer, his words carrying the particular warmth of someone expressing sympathy for difficult circumstances. Marcus translated automatically. "Mr. Riang says that Cambodia has great respect for scholarly achievement and regrets that American institutions sometimes fail to value such expertise properly." The gentle criticism, delivered through Marcus's translation, highlighted the irony of a situation where international clients immediately recognized and appreciated capabilities that the hosting firm had completely overlooked. Chaunary added her own observation about the importance of linguistic scholarship in facilitating international business relationships. She mentions that their family business has grown significantly through partnerships with linguistically skilled advisors, Marcus conveyed. "They've learned that cultural and language expertise often matters more than purely legal knowledge when building lasting international relationships." Thornton cleared his throat, his discomfort evident as he struggled to process the implications of 3 years of wasted expertise. So you've been cleaning our offices while possessing exactly the skills we pay consultants thousands of dollars to provide. The statement carried the weight of recognition about missed opportunities and management failures. Marcus returned his attention to the contract documents, his finger tracing clauses that required cultural context to interpret properly. The work was honest, and I needed employment immediately to support my daughter. Academic positions in specialized linguistics are extremely limited, and most translation services hire based on business connections rather than scholarly credentials. The mention of his daughter added another layer of complexity to their understanding. This was not just about professional qualifications, but about parental responsibility and the practical decisions that circumstances sometimes forced upon highly educated individuals. Cross found herself taking notes not just about contract terms, but about the broader implications of their discovery. Marcus, would you be interested in consulting on international client communications? We clearly need someone with your expertise, and this situation has revealed some significant gaps in our service capabilities. The offer emerged tentatively, as if testing whether the transformation they were witnessing might extend beyond this single crisis into ongoing professional relationships. Marcus continued his careful review of legal language while considering the question. Dara interjected with detailed questions about manufacturing timelines, his Vietnamese accented English mixing with occasional phrases in his native Khmer. Marcus responded in both languages, facilitating a discussion that revealed the complexity of coordinating production schedules across multiple countries with different regulatory requirements and cultural business practices. As he translated increasingly technical discussions about quality control standards and shipping logistics, Marcus's expertise became impossible to question or dismiss. He understood not just languages, but the industrial processes being described, the regulatory frameworks governing international manufacturing, and the cultural protocols that made such partnerships successful. Kozel made a comment that brought warm laughter from his family, his tone carrying the affection of shared understanding. Marcus translated with a slight smile. Mr. Yang says that sometimes the most valuable people are found in unexpected places, and wise leaders learn to recognize worth regardless of current circumstances. The observation hung in the air with the weight of gentle instruction about leadership, recognition, and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to identify true capability. It was delivered with a diplomatic courtesy that made criticism impossible to dismiss, while ensuring the message was unmistakably clear. The contract discussion continued, but the dynamics had shifted permanently. Marcus was no longer a surprising interruption to normal business, but rather the skilled professional around whom the entire negotiation now revolved. His expertise finally visible and properly valued by people who had previously seen him as furniture. The contract negotiation proceeded with a smoothness that stood in stark contrast to the morning's earlier chaos. Marcus facilitated discussions of intellectual property clauses, manufacturing quality standards, and regulatory compliance requirements with the fluency of someone who had spent years navigating such complexities. Every technical term was rendered precisely, every cultural nuance preserved in translation. Kozel expressed particular satisfaction with several contract modifications that Marcus had suggested, his approval carrying the weight of someone who had negotiated numerous international agreements. Through Marcus's translation, he explained that the proposed changes would satisfy both American legal requirements and Cambodian business customs, creating a framework that honored both cultures rather than privileging one over the other. The efficiency was remarkable. What should have taken hours of back-and-forth clarification was accomplished in minutes of clear, culturally informed communication. Dara's questions about labor practices were answered with specificity that demonstrated Marcus's understanding of both countries' employment regulations. Channery's concerns about quality control protocols were addressed with technical precision that revealed his knowledge of manufacturing standards. Cross found herself making notes not just about contract terms, but about Marcus's consultation methods, recognizing that his approach differed significantly from the translation services they had previously employed. Where others provided literal word-for-word conversion, Marcus offered cultural interpretation that preserved meaning while ensuring comprehension across different business traditions. Thornton's discomfort was becoming increasingly visible as he watched the negotiation proceed under Marcus's guidance. Every successful exchange highlighted the morning's embarrassing failures while demonstrating capabilities that had been present in their building for 3 years, unrecognized and unutilized. When Kozel asked about ongoing communication protocols for the partnership's implementation phase, his question carried implications that extended far beyond the immediate contract. Marcus translated the inquiry while maintaining professional neutrality, but the subtext was unmistakable. The clients wanted assurance that future communications would maintain the same level of cultural sensitivity and linguistic accuracy they were experiencing today. Mr. Riang inquires about communication procedures for the next 18 months of partnership development. Marcus conveyed with careful diplomacy. He wants to ensure that the high level of cultural understanding demonstrated today will continue throughout the implementation process. The question created a moment of awkward silence as the partners realized that Marcus's expertise was not easily replaceable. Their usual translation services had already proven inadequate for this level of sophisticated business communication, and finding alternatives with comparable cultural knowledge will be both expensive and time-consuming. Cross exchanged glances with Thornton that spoke volumes about professional calculations and damage control. Marcus, she began carefully, would you be available for ongoing consultation on this account? We want to ensure that our clients receive the same level of service throughout the partnership development. The offer was delivered with a tentative quality that suggested recognition of shifted power dynamics. Marcus was no longer simply an employee who could be directed, but rather a skilled professional whose cooperation was essential for maintaining the firm's most valuable client relationship. Before Marcus could respond, Kozel made a statement that transformed the entire dynamic. His words were directed specifically toward Marcus, delivered with the formal courtesy reserved for respected business partners. Marcus translated with characteristic precision, but his slight pause before speaking suggested the weight of what was being conveyed. Mr. Riang says that based on today's experience, he would prefer that all future communications regarding this partnership be handled exclusively through you. He feels that your cultural understanding and linguistic precision are essential for maintaining the trust and clarity that successful partnerships require. The statement landed in the conference room like a diplomatic ultimatum delivered with perfect courtesy. The clients were essentially declaring that Marcus's participation was a condition of their continued business relationship, making his expertise not just valuable but indispensable. Dara added his own observation, speaking directly to Marcus in fluent Khmer while maintaining eye contact that suggested respect between equals. His words carried the warmth of professional appreciation mixed with cultural recognition. Marcus translated with obvious care for diplomatic nuance. Young Mr. Riang expresses gratitude for your scholarly approach to our business culture. He says it's rare to find Americans who understand that successful partnerships require more than legal documents, that they must be built on foundations of mutual respect and cultural appreciation. The compliment was delivered through Marcus's translation, but its impact on the listening partners was unmistakable. They were witnessing not just linguistic capability, but the kind of cultural competence that built lasting international business relationships, expertise that their firm desperately needed but had failed to recognize. Chandneri spoke softly to her husband, her tone carrying the authority of someone offering business counsel. Marcus translated her suggestion with professional detachment, though the implications were revolutionary for the firm's established hierarchies. Mrs. Riang suggests that Mr. Chen's expertise might be valuable for other international clients as well. She mentions that word of today's successful communication will likely reach other Cambodian businesses considering American partnerships. The observation contained both opportunity and subtle pressure. Marcus's performance had impressed clients who moved in international business circles where recommendations carried substantial weight. His expertise could become a significant competitive advantage for the firm, but only if they recognized and properly utilized his capabilities. Thornton cleared his throat, his expression cycling through calculations about professional implications and career consequences. The morning's mockery now seemed not just inappropriate, but potentially catastrophic for client relationships and firm reputation. Marcus, he began with uncharacteristic hesitation. I think we need to discuss a significant change in your role here. Today has demonstrated capabilities that we clearly undervalued, and that seems to have been a serious oversight on our part. The admission emerged with the careful phrasing of someone acknowledging mistakes while trying to maintain some measure of professional dignity. But the power dynamics had shifted irreversibly, and everyone in the room understood that Marcus now held cards that could reshape his relationship with the firm entirely. The conference room door opened with the quiet authority that announced Elizabeth Hartwell's presence before she spoke a word. The firm's managing partner carried herself with the measured confidence of someone who had built her career on identifying talent and managing complex situations. Her silver hair, perfectly styled, and her navy suit conveying both professionalism and approachability. Her entrance created a subtle shift in the room's energy as conversations paused and postures straightened in response to someone whose judgment carried career-defining weight. Elizabeth's eyes moved quickly across the scene, taking in the successfully negotiating clients, the signed contract documents, and the unexpected sight of Marcus Chun sitting at the conference table as an active participant rather than invisible staff. Bradley, Miranda, she acknowledged with professional courtesy before turning her attention to the clients. Mr. and Mrs. Riang, Mr. Dara, I apologize for not being here to welcome you personally. I understand there were some initial communication challenges that have been resolved. Kozel responded in English, his words carefully chosen but carrying genuine warmth. Mrs. Hartwell, we are very pleased with how the situation developed. Your Mr. Chun provided exceptional service that exceeded our expectations for cultural understanding and linguistic precision. The compliment, delivered with the formal courtesy that characterized Kozel's business communications, carried implications that Elizabeth immediately recognized. She had spent decades building the firm's international reputation, and client satisfaction comments like this one typically followed months of careful relationship building, not crisis management. Marcus, she said, her tone carrying curiosity rather than surprise, would you mind explaining how today's situation unfolded? I'm told there was a translation emergency that you were able to resolve. Marcus provided a concise summary of the morning's events, his explanation delivered with professional objectivity that avoided criticism of his colleagues, while making the sequence of failures and solutions unmistakably clear. Elizabeth listened with the focused attention of someone processing information that would inform significant decisions. And you have expertise in Southeast Asian linguistics? She confirmed, her statement carrying the weight of someone who had already begun making connections about missed opportunities and management oversights. May I ask about your educational background? The question was delivered with respect rather than interrogation, recognizing that the successful contract negotiation had already established Marcus's qualifications beyond reasonable doubt. Marcus provided the same biographical summary he had shared earlier, his doctorate, research experience, and specialized knowledge laid out with quiet dignity. Elizabeth's expression remained professionally neutral, but her follow-up questions revealed the systematic thinking that had made her one of the region's most respected legal administrators. How long have you been with the firm, Marcus? And in what capacity? 3 years, he replied simply. Janitorial services, evening and weekend maintenance primarily. The position became available after my university department was eliminated, and I needed immediate employment to support my daughter. The explanation created a moment of silence that felt heavier than the morning's earlier crisis. Elizabeth's eyes moved from Marcus to Thornton and Cross, her expression carrying the particular gravity of someone calculating the implications of systemic failures in talent recognition and resource utilization. So for 3 years, Cross interjected with defensive urgency. We've had doctoral-level expertise in exactly the area where we've been struggling with client communications, and no one in management knew about it. The observation was delivered as if recognizing the absurdity might somehow diminish the professional implications. But Elizabeth's steady gaze suggested that deflection would not be effective in this particular conversation. Janitor made a quiet comment in Khmer, her tone carrying the diplomatic courtesy of someone offering helpful observation rather than criticism. Marcus translated with careful neutrality, though the message carried unmistakable weight about management competence and organizational awareness. Mrs. Riang notes that in Cambodian business culture, wise leaders make it their responsibility to understand the capabilities of everyone in their organization. She suggests that valuable expertise can be found at every level if leaders take time to look beyond surface appearances. The gentle instruction was delivered with the kind of cultural authority that made disagreement impossible while ensuring the educational message reached its intended audience. Elizabeth nodded with visible appreciation for both the wisdom and the diplomatic skill required to convey it effectively. Marcus, she said, turning her full attention to him with the focused intensity of someone making important decisions, I want to discuss a significant change in your role here. Today has demonstrated that we have been dramatically underutilizing your expertise, and I suspect our clients would benefit enormously from your cultural and linguistic knowledge. The offer was delivered with characteristic directness, but it carried implications that extended far beyond job responsibilities to questions of recognition, compensation, and professional respect that have been absent from Marcus's experience at the firm. Before responding, Marcus facilitated a brief exchange between Kozel and Dara about their timeline for departure, ensuring that client needs remain the priority despite the personal implications of the conversation. The gesture demonstrated the professional priorities that had enabled him to navigate the morning's crisis successfully. Elizabeth observed the interaction with obvious interest, recognizing leadership qualities and client management skills that typically required years of development in corporate environments. Her follow-up question carried the weight of someone who had identified potential that extended far beyond translation services. Have you considered returning to academic work? Or perhaps consulting on international business development? Your combination of scholarly expertise and practical cultural knowledge seems ideally suited for firms like ours that serve international clients. The question opened possibilities that Marcus had not allowed himself to consider during 3 years of economic survival and parental responsibility. But before he could respond, Kozel made another observation that transformed the entire discussion. Speaking directly to Elizabeth with the authority of someone whose business decisions carried substantial weight, he explained through Marcus's translation that today's experience had convinced him to recommend the firm to other Cambodian businesses considering American partnerships, specifically because of the cultural competence they had demonstrated. The endorsement represented potential business development worth millions of dollars, all contingent on maintaining the level of service that Marcus had provided. Elizabeth's expression made clear that she understood both the opportunity and the imperative for ensuring Marcus's continued involvement with international client relationships. Elizabeth's attention shifted to Thornton and Cross with the measured intensity of someone preparing to address systemic failures that had nearly cost the firm its most valuable international client. Her voice carried the authority of decades spent building professional relationships and managing complex organizational dynamics. Bradley, Miranda, I need to understand how a $15 million client relationship came within minutes of complete failure due to communication issues that we apparently had the expertise to resolve internally. The question was delivered with professional courtesy that barely concealed deeper concerns about judgment and management competence. Thornton's earlier confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by the uncomfortable awareness of someone whose casual cruelty had been exposed in the worst possible context. We had no way of knowing that Marcus possessed such specialized qualifications. Personnel records only showed his janitorial employment, not his educational background. Elizabeth's expression suggested that explanations about personnel records would not adequately address the broader issues at stake. And when the translation crisis developed this morning, what was your response to the emergency? Cross answered with visible reluctance, her earlier mockery now seeming not just inappropriate, but professionally catastrophic. We exhausted all our usual translation services. When those failed, we became desperate. Bradley made some comments about offering his paycheck to anyone who could help, including joking about asking the cleaning staff. The admission hung in the air with a weight of professional conduct that had crossed lines of basic human dignity. Elizabeth's silence stretched long enough to ensure that the implications of such behavior were fully understood by everyone present. Marcus continued facilitating quiet conversations between the Riang family members, his professional focus unchanged despite the uncomfortable examination of his colleagues' behavior. His dignity in the face of their morning's humiliation demonstrated character qualities that leadership positions required. Kozel made a comment that Marcus translated with careful diplomatic neutrality, though the content carried unmistakable observations about organizational culture and leadership effectiveness. Mr. Riang notes that successful businesses identify and develop talent at every level, rather than making assumptions based on current job assignments. The gentle criticism was delivered with cultural courtesy, but its implications for firm management were impossible to ignore. Elizabeth nodded with visible appreciation for the wisdom, while clearly processing the broader message about leadership failures and missed opportunities. When Dara asked about quality control protocol for the manufacturing partnership, Marcus's response revealed another layer of expertise that left his colleagues struggling to process the full scope of their oversight. His knowledge extended beyond linguistics to include industrial processes, international regulatory frameworks, and supply chain management across multiple countries. Elizabeth listened to the technical discussion with growing recognition that Marcus's value to the firm extended far beyond crisis management. His combination of scholarly knowledge, cultural competence, and practical business understanding represented exactly the kind of expertise that international law firms needed but struggled to find and retain. Mrs. Hartwell, Chan Neri said through Marcus's translation, her tone carrying the authority of someone offering valuable business counsel. We have been impressed not only with Mr. Chen's linguistic abilities, but with his understanding of how cultural differences affect business relationships. This level of competence is rare and should be recognized appropriately. The observation was delivered with diplomatic courtesy, but it carried clear implications about professional recognition and compensation that reflected Marcus's demonstrated value rather than his previous job classification. Elizabeth's response indicated full understanding of both the compliment and its underlying message. Marcus, she said, addressing him directly with the respect accorded to valued professional colleagues, I want to offer you a position as our Director of International Client Relations, with particular responsibility for Southeast Asian partnerships. Today has demonstrated expertise that we desperately need and have apparently been ignoring. The offer was delivered with characteristic directness, but it represented a transformation that extended far beyond job titles to encompass recognition, compensation, and professional respect that acknowledged Marcus's true capabilities and contributions. Thornton's expression cycled through emotions that included professional embarrassment, recognition of career implications, and growing awareness that his morning's mockery had been observed by clients whose business relationships could make or break reputations in international legal circles. Cross attempted to recover some measure of professional standing through belated recognition of Marcus's abilities. We should have conducted more thorough background interviews with all our staff. This situation has revealed gaps in our human resources processes that need immediate attention. Elizabeth's response carried the particular authority of someone who would be making decisions about accountability and systemic changes. The issue isn't just about background checks, Miranda. It's about basic professional respect and the assumption that worth can be determined by current job assignments rather than actual capabilities. Kozel spoke directly to Marcus in Khmer, his tone carrying the warmth of someone offering both congratulations and business partnership. Marcus translated with obvious care for diplomatic precision, though his slight smile suggested personal satisfaction with the recognition being offered. Mr. Riang congratulates you on this well-deserved recognition and wants to confirm that all future communications for this partnership will be handled exclusively through you. He also mentions that he will be recommending your services to other Cambodian businesses considering American partnerships. The endorsement represented potential business development worth millions of dollars, all contingent on Marcus's continued involvement with international client relationships. The transformation from invisible janitor to indispensable business asset was complete, witnessed by everyone who had participated in the morning's crisis and resolution. Elizabeth's final observation carried the weight of organizational learning that would influence future policies and practices. Today has taught us valuable lessons about recognizing talent, treating all employees with dignity, and ensuring that our assumptions about people don't prevent us from utilizing their actual capabilities. The statement was delivered as institutional wisdom, but everyone present understood that it was also a judgment about leadership failures that had nearly cost the firm its reputation and its most valuable client relationship. 3 months later, Marcus Chun sat in his corner office reviewing contract proposals from 2 additional Cambodian textile manufacturers who had sought out the firm specifically based on Kozal Riang's recommendations. The morning sunlight streamed through windows that had once reflected his cleaning cart, now illuminating a workspace filled with linguistic reference materials, cultural guides, and international business publications. The transformation extended far beyond office assignments. Marcus's insights had helped the firm secure partnerships worth over $40 million, establishing Hartwell, Thornton and Associates as the preferred legal counsel for Southeast Asian businesses entering American markets. His cultural competence had prevented several potential miscommunications that could have derailed negotiations, proving his value repeatedly through successful outcomes. Elizabeth knocked softly before entering, carrying a satisfaction that came from witnessing organizational changes that improved both business results and workplace culture. The new employee recognition program she had implemented following Marcus's situation had already identified 3 other staff members with advanced degrees and specialized skills that had been completely overlooked by management. Marcus, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk, I wanted to discuss the Singapore expansion opportunity. The clients there are specifically requesting someone with your combination of linguistic expertise and cultural understanding for their American operations. The proposal represented another significant career opportunity, but Marcus's response reflected priorities that had remained constant throughout his professional transformation. I'm honored by their confidence, Elizabeth. However, I want to ensure that Sophia's stability remains my primary consideration. Any international travel would need to accommodate her school schedule and maintain the consistency she needs. Elizabeth nodded with the understanding of someone who had learned to value employees who brought their authentic priorities to professional decisions. We can structure the consulting arrangement to minimize travel requirements. Video conferencing technology allows for most cultural guidance and translation work to be conducted remotely. Through the office windows, Marcus could see the building's maintenance staff conducting their afternoon routines. He made it a point to learn everyone's name, to understand their backgrounds and aspirations. Following the lesson, his own experience had taught about hidden capabilities and unrecognized potential. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, now finishing 4th grade with confidence that had grown alongside her father's professional recognition. Papa, Mrs. Rodriguez says you're on the news website again about helping international businesses. She's very proud and says I should be too. Marcus typed back quickly. I am proud every day to be your father, little star. See you tonight for our geography project about Cambodia. The exchange represented continuity that anchored all his professional success. Sophia's pride in his achievements mattered more than any client contract or business recognition, and his decisions continued to prioritize her well-being above career advancement opportunities. A knock at his door announced Jeremy, the young associate who had always acknowledged Marcus with genuine courtesy during his janitorial years. His current role as Marcus's primary legal research assistant represented both personal growth and the firm's commitment to identifying and developing talent more effectively. Marcus, the Nguyen Industries contracts are ready for your final review, Jeremy reported, his tone carrying professional respect that had remained constant despite dramatically changed circumstances. They specifically complimented your cultural preparation notes and want to use our services for their expansion into 3 additional states. The success stories had accumulated steadily, each client relationship strengthened by Marcus's ability to navigate not just language barriers, but cultural expectations that determine business success or failure. His reputation was spreading through international business networks where recommendations carried substantial weight. Cross appeared in the doorway, her interaction with Marcus now characterized by professional respect that acknowledged both his expertise and the lessons learned from earlier misjudgments. Marcus, the Malaysian delegation will arrive next Tuesday. I wanted to coordinate with you about cultural preparation for the partners who will be handling their account. The request represented institutional changes that extended Marcus's influence throughout the firm's international practice. His cultural competence training had become standard preparation for all attorneys working with international clients, preventing the kind of communication failures that had nearly cost them the Riang partnership. Elizabeth returned to discuss the evening's celebration dinner, organized to recognize the firm's international business growth and Marcus's central role in achieving those results. The event would include clients, community leaders, and university representatives who had expressed interest in developing ongoing relationships with Marcus's expertise. As the workday concluded, Marcus gathered his materials with the same careful attention to detail that had characterized his cleaning routines, though now applied to cultural analysis reports and linguistic consultation notes. The skills that made him an excellent janitor, attention to detail, respect for other spaces, and quiet dignity in all circumstances, had translated seamlessly into executive responsibilities. The evening reunion with Sophia represented the day's most important moment. Her excitement about his achievements was matched by her pride in sharing her own school successes, their relationship strengthened by mutual respect and shared celebration of learning and growth. Later, as they worked together on her geography project about Cambodia, Sophia asked thoughtful questions about Kozel and Chaneri, about cultural differences that required understanding rather than judgment, about the importance of treating all people with dignity regardless of their current circumstances. The conversation represented lessons that extended far beyond academic assignments to encompass values about human worth, hidden capabilities, and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to recognize the potential present in every person encountered throughout life's journey. If this story touched your heart, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, character, or if you've witnessed similar hidden talents in someone you know. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are found in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone to recognize their worth.